It's Eve 2020. Today is May 21st at 1500. This is Madero here with a small group of people. We'll have some informal Eve chat in just a second. First, let's go to the PCU for the last 24 hours, see what that looked like. First solid wave in a while without any drops or gaps, and it's simmered down to a good 36,000 during 1800. That's basically prime time in EVE Online. But nice lows of about 20,000. So 20,000. That looks like a new norm. Looking at the board for Dotlan, most violent regions in Nullsec, Vale of the Silent came up with 1,481 ships destroyed. And second place is Geminite with 821, and Delve in third with 726. Empire Space looks like it's back to normal with the Forge at 2,300 ships destroyed, Lone Trek 2,800, and Citadel 2,100. That is what we normally expect there. Most violent systems in Nullsec for the last 24 hours. TVN, TAC, FM, and Vale of the Silent is had something going on there. 586 ships destroyed, 314 pods. Here's one that we heard about. XTAC 7, again from Pure Blind region. Had 235 ships destroyed. I think those were capitals. Or capitals destroyed a Goonswarm fleet. So we'll talk about that one. And in third place, Geminite 2H TAC TSE had 200 ships destroyed. Here's the XTAC 7 fight that happened. There's a lot of activity going on in this system in Pure Blind. Pure Blind in general is a hotbed. I believe Goonswarm deployed to Outer Ring. No, not Outer Ring, into Cloud Ring, which is right next to Pure Blind, I believe.
Correct. They moved to FDZ.
Let's have a look at that. FDC?
Foxtrot. Did I say FDZ? F7C, sorry. Oh my jeez. Foxtrot 7 Charlie.
Thank you. That one worked. Ah, yes. So you can see them in the bottom right here for Cloud Ring. Right outside of Placid. Why is that strategically the right place to stage?
I don't know if it is necessarily, but it's where they've chosen. I assume they have some form of infrastructure there to make their life easier. I know they're utilizing it to move into low sec to pressure Snuff in their current campaign. There was a really there's a moderate-sized Dread Brawl this morning, actually, looks like from the kill board, where they engaged Snuff and lost, it looks like, actually.
What system was that in? Do you have that handy?
The system was Notaras, which is actually straight out of the Notaras news. But November Oscar, Tango Oscar, Romeo Alpha Sierra.
Okay, let's have a look at that. Oh, shoot. Say it one more time. What is it?
Yes, Notoras.
Got it.
If you just go to Big Kill Zone, it's pretty...
yeah, I found it. Yeah, TNT, Goonswarm. Looks like Siege Green got him with Snuff. See what's related. Related picks up all the kill mails that happen at the same time, same place. You can see that red denotes ships destroyed. black are ships that survived. So yeah, it looks like Dread's got walloped. Mostly snuffed out with, oof, they dropped some Titans. Gosh, can you believe that? Snuff, well, with Siege Green's help, not afraid to drop Titans on Goonswarm. All the nags got primaried first, it looks like.
Yeah, my guess is I obviously wasn't at the battle and I don't know quite exactly what happened, but there was likely a fight over a structure in some form. Snuff surprised them. Small dread bomb looks like they counterbombed, which was then met with super escalation force, which I'm sure got every goon within the galaxy riled up, and then they what do you call it? They moonwalked away and took a few losses, and the battle report goes heavily in their favor. That'd be my guess on how it went, but it's it definitely looks like it was an interesting brawl to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, you could be winning a fight pretty well, but when you extract, you can see you'll lose 15% or so on efficiency because some of your guys will get killed as you're the one leaving the battlefield. So you didn't keep the grid, you didn't hold on to it. But when you're extracting, you're going to take some losses, and that'll even out a battle report. But even here, Goonswarm, with that opportunity, if that happened, still had 40% efficiency to snuffed
Well,
out
the full
60.
sacrilege fleet, which is then killing fighters at the end of the battle, if you look at the timeline, indicates to me that they were likely holding the field with subcaps, and almost all of the snuff dreadwalks just kind of moonwalked out. And my assumption is then that the supers kind of cleared any tackle that was relevant to them in low sec, which is basically just hicks, and then moonwalked themselves.
Oh, let's talk about that a second. Why is it basically only Hicks in low sec?
Well, it's either only hicks or 50 points or 25 points for supers, I guess, of warp disruption, right? So most fleets are not designed with that in mind, and you have to quite heavily adjust your fits to do that. So if you can use things like tackle oracles, which have like 20, 30 warp scramble points or something like that, but if you don't adjust your fleet composition to build those in, generally those things are not there and provided to you. And they're utilizing sacrileges here, which is very much a null sec fleet with that kind of a design. So obviously they weren't super prepped to go after supers, and I mean, if you're Goonswarm, do you really expect Snuff and Infinity to drop supers on you? I wouldn't.
Hmm.
It's I mean maybe you do, but regardless, they weren't prepared for it. Snuff took advantage. They pretty decisively won the battle, looks like, and managed to extract all of their dreadnoughts. And with the supers, they cleared tackle and were able to extract the supers. So
Yeah, according to Caramancer here, he says 38 dreads and one character, the small whelp. He said Snuff dropped 8 minutes before downtime. Wow. And then after downtime, Imperium extracted all remaining caps.
yeah, so I don't know if those supers are still on that grid, but I would be skeptical that they are. Actually, it looks like from the timeline, yeah, when downtime ended, the fighters were still in space. So, but regardless, it's not like you can just through the course of downtime mechanics, it's very difficult to do anything about that kind of situation.
Dropping right before downtime, right? The game, in downtime, the game gets interrupted, and then everybody gets knocked off the game so that the game can do some maintenance, and then the game comes back on. It's an interruption. It's basically a timeout that people use strategically. Dropping 8 minutes before downtime with supers, is that a safety precaution that if things go bad, you only have 8 minutes to survive before there's a timeout called?
Correct. I mean, there's no way for most groups in the game to marshal the forces and get them there in a couple of minutes, and then have a couple more minutes to shoot the target and kill it, uh, especially from the distance they are from that system. Obviously, Snuff is massively outgunned here, and they want to do their best to fight the fight. But And obviously, the sport of Infinity Avenger is pretty key in this fight, it looks like. But they're taking a chance, but it's also a calculated chance, right? They're not pushing themselves past what they feel is their safety or comfort zone.
Yeah, who's Infinity Avenger? What group
So
is that?
Infinity Avenger is a Chinese-based group, is my understanding. I don't have a ton of interaction with them, but they're to a degree, they're similar to Snuff in that they're very high SP pilots. My understanding is they actually originate from Serenity, but they've stayed here because of the content. And they try out a ton of new stuff. They're very adept at uh, all forms of fleet warfare from what I've seen, and they're just really really capable and really really dangerous.
So you have Siege Green and Infinity Avenger with Snuff. That sound pretty deadly?
Yeah, absolutely. Siege Green has grown a ton since the um, Korean localization and growth into the server. So as before that happened, Siege Green was one of the primary Korean groups in the game. And with that explosion of recruitment opportunities, they've taken the opportunity to grow, and they were already a very strong and very relevant force before that happened. So usually Snuff and Sea Green are actually at each other's throats in lowsec to at least some degree. So to see them kind of come together to fight off the nullsec approach is not super surprising, but it's always interesting to see when the little guys kind of team up together to fight the big guy.
Yeah. There they are, Siege Green, working with Infinity Avenger and Snuffed Out. Pretty wild. You have to watch that. And that is, as you said, that is Goonswarm or the Imperium putting pressure on Snuffed Out in the Blackrise area.
Yeah, my understanding is that Snuff had been harassing a lot of their logistics infrastructure in the area, and they felt it was time to take the gun out and apply some counter pressure, let's say. So
Yeah. I was wondering where you're going with that.
yeah, well, I could have gone a different way,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. Thank you for
maybe
respecting the family-friendly show. All right. Well, cool. Let's look at this other one. It happened. This is Goonswarm again, getting the worst end of this. This is an X-Tech 7. Where'd it go? I had it queued. Right there. It's just right there. Okay. From what I heard, this was.
is this the U.S. time zone fleet fight last night?
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That resignation in your voice. Looks like Flood from Karma Fleet was FCing. I think he's a bit younger. I think he was doing was it destroyers before? He's known to us. He used to hang out at TIS. He left at some point. Let's see. This is a pretty one-sided loss. It cost 40 billion, but it was 2% efficiency or 3% efficiency to like a 98. You don't usually see that kind of efficiency. What happened there, do you think?
Once again, not a fight it was at, so I'm just gonna take a guess looking at the battle report, but they obviously engaged something with a sacrilege fleet. Horde and NC Dot are both present there with respect to fleets, as well as a Horde carrier fleet. There's an Astros on grid, so it's a safe bet to assume they were attacking that Astro House. And from the looks of it, they just were below critical mass of damage to kill anything, so they had no real ability to to kill any of their targets. And when they engaged, and they just started taking losses right away. So obviously, if you start below the damage threshold of getting kills, and then you just go less and less and less, as you lose damage
DPS.
chips,
Yeah.
it only gets worse. And I mean, it's a combination of good dictors, good tackling, whatever else ensured that, or maybe just not choosing to leave the field quick enough. I'm not sure, but over the course of the battle starts at like 02 or 7 minutes after, and the battle is over at 14 minutes after. So it's a 7-minute battle, right? So it's a very very short. But the entire time Horde, Carriers, NC, PL, or not NCPL, NC and Horde are chewing them apart, and they're not killing anything back, and it just it goes very very painfully for them, obviously.
Yeah, that's pretty demoralizing, isn't it, for an FC to kind of never get any traction, never deliver like any real kills to your people. Even though if sometimes I think if you lose, there's some solace in that you got some action and you actually killed some things, but
generally it's hard to take any real positives from this kind of a fight.
yeah.
It's you lost 40 bill and you killed one, right? It's if you lost 40 carriers and you killed one, you wouldn't be happy, and I don't think this is any real difference.
Yeah, Chiromancer thinks I'm trying to make it demoralizing by pointing it out. Point taken. I'm not trying to be demoralizing. Like I said, Flood used to hang out at TIS. It just, one-sided victories like that are, well, I don't know if they're rare. He's a new FC, so you got to give him some slack for stepping up and doing some stuff. But that's on the merits. That's 98% efficiency is hard to find when you get Goonswarm going against Horde. He'll get better.
98 efficiency is pretty uncommon in any real fight. But as I said, it's very likely a situation where they just didn't have enough critical massive damage to break stuff, and then they attempted to extract. They didn't get to extract easily, and they took significant losses trying to do so. There's not a really giant story to it, I don't think.
Yeah. But what's interesting is the reverse of this, right? Like how much we take for granted that fleets always end up getting their 25-30% efficiency even when they lose fights. Like, it's not that easy being an FC, is it?
Well, it's much more that generationally nowadays FCs are much more able to kind of evaluate the situation and target call correctly, I guess. And the situations where an FC takes a fight where he's not going to kill anything, where he's below the damage threshold to get kills back, is usually FCs just don't take those fights as much anymore. Mm-hmm. And obviously they took a fight here, and I see 167, I believe it is, or something on the Goonswarm side, according to the battle report, which is significant. I don't exactly know what the issue was. I can, come up with a dozen reasons, from bursting scepters to, bad target calling to range to you name it. But whatever it was, there was some serious issues, and they pretty effectively lost the fight. But in the scheme of things, 38 sacrileges is not gonna, end the Imperium. So
yeah, 40 billion is easily replaceable, I suppose. Anyway, that was a big fight. And the reason it came to my attention was because some of our Goonswarm people in TIS were saying, like, ouch, that one hurt. Or it was pretty, but they gave him a break because he's a newer FC.
It's always one of those things, when you lose these kind of fights, the key thing is always to just accept that you lost and to work on saying, what did we learn from it? How do we get better? Like, people have all the patience in the world for people making mistakes and fixing them. The only issue ever really comes when people make mistakes and they're refusing to accept that they made an error. And I mean, the battle report clearly shows that there was some error somewhere. It's just about determining what it is and, moving forward.
Right. Okay, hearing some reports here. I'm reading from January Valentine. Okay, I guess they're just discussing if Steam went down or not. I don't know. Timer board. Looking at the timer board, we have Goonswarm Federation, a couple of their structures. They have timers in the next 6 hours or less. They have a couple there. In Aquarius and GOP, really? GOP TAC GE, and in T8H TAC 66. In Aquarius, I think that's a region they don't live in nearly as actively as they do their home region of Delve. The Watchmen in Catch have a structure, an iHub coming out. That's part of your legacy, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's always a little bit, like, none of these timers that I can see are really like relevant in any form except for the last two. The two like there's always a kind of a who is it? The trolls and Quarius. I can't remember the group. But there's a small little group of people that troll iHubs and Darwin, I believe, or whatever the reformed nature or reformed name of the Darwin group is. They live in roughly the Quarius area and they attack and swarm stuff in that area. But they're such a small group. There's no real odds of them succeeding unless Goonswarm doesn't really care, in which case they'll succeed just fine. But it's one of those things where it's pretty standard, and much that Watchman timer in catch. Every once in a while we lose a random iHub here and there, but like it's not like it's a Warfront kind of thing. The last two are somewhat interesting though, as those two are actual like quite relevant timers. Where 2.2 is one of the more relevant systems in cache, where there's kind of a large war going on, and AZBR in Vale is right next door to TVN, and is a pretty relevant system for Forsaken Empire in their fight against Fraternity and Crew up in that. Although it's not owned by them anymore, obviously, so I can assume it's them that reinforced.
Right. So let's talk about what's going on. And where are you active right now? Where is Legacy Coalition active right now? Is it Cache or is it Insmother or both?
So Legacy is currently spread out throughout our space. The Legacy Voltron crew is deployed up near ZXIC or Northern Catch, which is more towards Providence in that area. Test itself has a deployment to CO06 in Wicked Creek, which extends via jumpers directly into Insmother, and is kind of our war front for cache Insmother. So, we're kind of doing a multitude of things at once, just trying to keep ourselves entertained as it goes, I guess.
Yeah, I heard something about, Nullsecnia Schulpen seems to be in the middle of things. Is Legacy trying to help them keep territory or take back territory or move into territory?
So we're in the process of pressuring them out, I guess you could say. It's not so much that we're putting any real effort into it as much as, that they attempted to take cache and they talked a little bit of stuff. So then they lost the majority of cache and now they're just kind of hovering in a corner and, fighting for their corner while the rest of cache is basically kind of a desolate wasteland. It's not the most exciting region in space, to say the least. You've got the majority of PanFam coming to support them, so it makes for kind of a good like block level proxy war, which is kind of interesting for the moment, and we'll kind of see how it develops over time. There's certainly lots of opportunities for good fights in the area.
So it's the opposite of what I set up there. It's that you guys are pressuring them out, and or PandaFam, or I'll call them PandaFam, are backing them up. So that's the proxy war. There was something here too where I think an executive from Nullsecnia took off and turned over territory or something like that.
I'm not tracking something like that. Not to say it didn't happen by any means.
Yeah. I have a vague recollection a few weeks ago of somebody, I don't know if it was Nullsecnia or somebody gave it to Nullsecnia, but some CEO on his departure turned over some territory to the opponent. That happens. I don't usually cover that because it's kind of like a cheap thrill, but something happened there. All right, so keeping yourselves busy in a proxy war or cache Insmother. Hey, so what happened to Army of Mango? How are they holding up now that Serenity's open?
As far as I'm tracking, they're doing fine. Obviously, they're going home a little bit and checking out the old place and making sure that the stove isn't on and making sure that all their stuff is still where it should be. But I think they've definitely come to the realization that Tranquility is a much more interesting server to be involved in, just because it's kind of everybody in different times and there's just so much more conflict culturally and naturally that it's a more interesting place to be. So from what I've seen, they seem to be sticking around, doing fine, enjoying the change of scenery. Although they've definitely went back to Serenity and exerted control um, with the force of 1,000 Titans on their home server.
They're known over there as PIBC, I believe.
Correct.
They were the ones that dominated that server by the time that it closed temporarily for a year or so.
A little bit more than a year, but yeah.
Was it 2 or 3?
Yeah, it was definitely closer to 2.
And
But suffice it to say, they had full control of that server when it.
Yeah, if this was Star Wars, they were like the Empire. But
I don't even think the Empire could ever dream of the control level they had on that server.
That's true.
They, somebody stage out of an NPC station, they drop a Keepstar off it and put 50 Titans permacamping it. It's like, oh,
wow,
like,
super oppressive.
Yeah, like their levels of oppression, like Tranquility has no idea the levels of oppression Serenity would put on, people that annoy them.
Yikes.
Yeah, and because everybody plays in the same time zone, it removes a certain component of the fluidity of control and harassment that we have on TQ.
All right. Hey man, so you're running for CSM again, am I correct? Yeah, I saw you there. VIly.
Yes, I am indeed running for CSM again.
Have you seen the list of candidates? What do you think? Is it going to be a different style of CSM?
It's hard to say. So I think there's probably 6 candidates that the blocks have like moderately or somewhat locked up, which leaves kind of 4 open slots. It'd be my guess. Possibly as few as 2 uh, if the low sec, high sec wormhole other candidates don't get their shit together. Basically, I guess you could say. But I definitely think there's a really nice kind of growth opportunity for some of the more interesting candidates. You've got interesting wormhole candidates. You've got interesting low sec candidates and high sec candidates. It's an interesting field. I feel like there's definitely fewer kind of troll candidates, and there should be a kind of an interesting spread of them.
The paperwork took out the trolls, it looks like. Such low efforts.
Sometimes that's really all it takes, right? Like I hate to put it like that, but like
lazy trolls.
Make a forum thread and you receive 20% less applications. It's like that definitely doesn't seem like a high bar to entry, but hey, it's always impossible to assess human laziness. So.
Yeah, that's pretty bad, I gotta say. But yeah, so there's only 40 candidates, which is on the low side of candidates running. Sometimes I think one time it got up to like 70 candidates, 72, I think. The last 2 runs, it's been around 50 or more, a little over 50. And this time I think it's 40.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's 40, but once you do a quick kind of run through of the candidates, you can probably knock off about 15 of them. And then it becomes a much more interesting kind of situation where you have some good personalities with non-zero chances of winning, kind of competing for each other, and where the decisions they make actually can matter in their abilities to get elected.
Right. So are there any candidates in there that you're kind of interested in personally?
Interested in? I don't. How do I put this? I'm more than willing to work with all of them, obviously, but certainly it'll be interesting to see new perspectives arrive in the council again. I think the new blood of this council was absolutely crucial to ensuring the massive amounts of success we've had in helping revitalize key portions of Eve, and I think that new voices again will further help do that. So
Yeah, I gotta say, I was kind of impressed by the diversity.
of candidates,
Hmm. I
yeah,
don't know if
I
they're.
mean,
I don't know
there's
if they're
definitely.
all.
Go ahead, sorry.
I don't know if they're all serious candidates, but at least there's a diversity applying.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you look at the bottom there, the very bottom one, it's like Zenuria, which obviously a candidate with no real support base, although he's actually a former CSM, which means that certainly he's.
Hmm.
I don't think he's got any realistic shot of getting in.
UX Death
Uh,
Running. There's a name from the past.
a name from the past, but not one with a chance to get in either, I don't think.
No constituency right now.
So, as much as the Legion of XIX bears his name, I'm not tracking any work with them in terms of actually trying to get support from them. So, just saying that someone is the Russian community candidate doesn't necessarily mean the Russian community will support you, and that community is traditionally highly fragmented. So,
Yeah, that's highly fragmented. Is something that people don't usually hear about them. Um,
the Russian community, they're always fragmented.
yeah, fighting amongst themselves. That's
It's
why I was.
very like even Final Reunion, the coalition of alliances is you know the Russian the personalities of the Russian community are highly polarizing, and uh, I know the people that run Fire have done and put in a lot of work trying to maintain uh, their group identity versus personal and smaller group identities. Just because the community is so leaning towards wanting to kill each other, basically.
Well, that's why it was such a big deal when they were united and able to march on the north against Northern Coalition. It's like, oh, they finally got together. And I think that might have been maybe the only time they got together. But anyway, so other CSMs that are not incumbents, right? Because you have people who are shoe-ins like you, Gobbins. Sorry if I'm failing anybody else. The Goonswarm guys. Aerith doesn't appear to be running, so that,
So, of the candidates, I would say myself through a combination of Test and Legacy, not Aerith, but Nominate Merkelchen, both probably pretty good guess, and Cobbins would be a pretty good guess, as Cobbins is. Those are the three largest alliances in the game, or in nullsec, I guess you should say, with their respective high-powered voting blocks. After that, things gonna get much more interesting. Honestly, like if I go down the list, like obviously Blazing Bunny from NC Dot has a shot with the NC Dot vote if they push behind him. Kenneth Field from PL might have a shot if they push behind him. Um, there's certainly lots of, how would you call it,
well,
Zoomer
steady.
support for Phantomite.
Mm-hmm.
So he's definitely
Zoomer
got.
support.
Well, I call it Zoomer support, but it's
Yeah.
generally that kind of shout loudly, young players, whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, whether he's the best candidate or not, there's definitely lots of people rooting for him. And when you're trying to get elected, that's by far the most
Yeah.
important factor.
What about Asterio from Horde? He's
So obviously, Horde's number one is going to be Goblins. So I know they try to spread out their candidates a little more, just in case one of them randomly gets told they can't be in, as tested a
right.
few years back.
That happened to
So
Horde actually.
yes, and that happened to Horde. I think the same year or the previous year, I can't remember.
What VIly's referring to is you run candidates, everybody agrees, okay, you'll be our candidate, we'll rally behind you, and then the official ballot comes out, and CCP has said that candidate is disqualified or cannot run. And what happens is you have a vacancy for a large group. That happened to Test, and it also happened to Horde.
Yeah, so one of our candidates actually got disqualified basically mid-voting block, so almost all of the test votes had been cast for him, and then they ended up going to the number two, which was Jinton at the time, which got him onto CSM.
Oh, how sad.
which
It was that it was mid-voting. That's terrible.
yeah, so CCP hadn't, I guess, done the vetting, or somebody brought up a conversation that was a little inappropriate, and
Yep.
and
Pandemic
I guess
Legion.
they were blind. Yeah, I might have been, I can't remember, but regardless, he was told his candidacy was over, and then all of our STV1 votes transferred to Jintan, who was our number two, who then shortly after joined the Imperium, which is how they got 5 CSMs, I think, on that council.
So he took the test vote and went to Imperium. Yeah, it's happened before.
Yeah.
Heck, the wormholer got in, forget his name, and then went over to Goonswarm. And they
well, the wormhole vote this year is going to be interesting as well, with both
right,
Exuki and Loris Echo
Loris Echo.
Cross. So it's basically kind of an interesting situation where you have the kind of wormhole blue donut representative and the wormhole rebel alliance kind of representative in Exuki, kind of both vying for a spot. And I don't know if either or both of them will get in, or how it will go. It's really hard to evaluate the wormhole groups, as I just don't have enough SA to judge their ability to put votes out there and to get people to actually vote the line.
That is going to be that's going to be the most interesting aspect of this CSM. Can Exuki make it back? He is being challenged by Laura Secco, not only out of the game for CSM, but really they're challenging each other in the game. Laura Secco belongs to Hard Knocks, and they have been evicting people, and they really made Exuki's corp a target and essentially drove them out and denied them wormhole passage, basically. So they can't settle anywhere where they won't get targeted and evicted by Hard Knocks. And from Exuki's point of view, they keep saying, well, we want an apology from this guy, this executive of your corp. Well, that guy apologized. Not good enough. So then they say, we want this, and not good enough. Okay, we want Exuki to leave the corp. That'll never happen because the corp revolves around Exuki. So they keep making demands that are impossible to meet, or at least the last one's impossible to meet. And then, okay, well, if you're not going to do that, then we're going to deny you wormhole space. Therefore, you're no longer a wormhole candidate, might be part of it. Since then, Exuki took his corporation to Initiative Associates, I think, and is trying to figure out, like, what his next move is, I think.
Yeah,
very interesting.
I mean, between the two wormhole block candidates, you've definitely got, or the two wormholers, or the two sides of the wormhole population. Then you've got the low sec vote, which is kind of interesting, which is spread out between Phantomite and Stitch.
Stitch, yeah. And he did very well last year, Stitch, in a very competitive and crowded marketplace of candidates.
Yeah, and I don't think he really had himself branded fully or strongly enough last year to really push through.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, I feel like he's definitely a better candidate in terms of what he's got to bring. But as I say, you've got Phantomite, who's also eating up that low sec vote with a lot of the kind of Zoomer and more populist votes, and so my hope is at least one of them will make it, and that they don't kind of push each other to the side, leaving the center open for somebody else, which is unfortunately, something that happens quite often in CSM elections. You split a voting block, and neither candidate gets in.
Right, they dilute their collective gameplay power. So who do you think will surprise us?
So I definitely feel like the other interesting category we're talking about is kind of the media personnel. So you've got the Oz, you've got Torvald, you've got January, like you've got a lot of these like side candidates who uh, have kind of a public face out there where people are at least know who they are, and that they have some presence within the media sphere of Eve. And I think that opens up a lot of opportunities for these candidates to kind of sneak in with votes that people might not have expected, just because it's really hard to evaluate what the Twitch audience is, what the YouTube audience is, and how much that can be kind of mobilized behind you.
Yeah, how that translates to actual votes.
Yeah, and if I can find it here, there's the CEO of the Newbie Corp. Where is it? gentleman. He's the CEO of
Yeah,
like this.
brand newbies.
No, not brand newbies. It's the HiSec group that has like
Oh, yeah.
25,000.
Yeah, that's Sicko. Why do I forget their name all the time? That's say it again.
Icarus Hazael, sorry.
But what's the name of the group?
Silent Company.
Thank you. Silent Company. Yes, he's got 20,000 accounts in his group. Who knows how many living bodies are there and how they're motivated
Somewhere
to vote.
between 5,000 to 6,000 probably active accounts, which is, if he can
Well,
actually get them to go vote, that's more than enough to not only get in, but get in without even, a worry kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The let's find him. Icarus right here, Cassell. So that's going to be interesting to watch. Brisk will probably be put on. Brisk is former CSM for Initiative, or he comes from Initiative. He will probably be put on. I can't imagine them leaving him off the Goonswarm ticket. The question is, what position will he occupy?
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of a slew of interesting HiSec candidates, from Icarus to Mike Azaria is back again.
Right, Mike. Mm-hmm.
You've got Insidious, who's both low and high to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Insidious Sainthood.
There's just a lot of interesting candidates from all over the place, and as I say, my hope is we'll see a increasingly diverse CSM. My worry is always that they'll split their own voting blocks, and then we'll just run up the center with standard alliance voting basis.
This guy here, Iron Wolf, is he the guy that was in Short Bus Syndicate?
I don't know Iron Wolf's corp history enough.
Yeah, he spells it the same. Let me look him up. If so, he has an interesting story, but I don't know if that's the same guy. Let's check it out.
I mean, Iron Wolf is like basically the main FC for Invictus right now. He's a really capable guy. I know traditionally he's worked with Sword Dragon. He's worked
Yes,
with
that's
me.
the same guy.
He's definitely been around the game for quite a while.
Yeah, he got taken out by Pandemic Legion when he left GOTG, or Dead Coalition. He basically had a sudden departure from that coalition, and his group was assassinated on the way out, and people were like, did Sort just feed one of his defectors to Pandemic Legion on their way out? There was like this mystery behind it. So that was Iron Wolf. And I wrote an article called I think it was something like the strange demise of Iron Wolf or something.
I don't know, to be honest. There is one other candidate that's somewhat interesting within this group that we haven't mentioned on either, which is Maria Taylor of Fraternity.
Right.
The kind of nationalist representative, going in as a Chinese representative.
So you think that that might rally some real world nationality voting sympathies for Chinese players?
It very well could. I don't know the strength of how that's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's tricky, right? It's like if all of Fraternity votes for them, then 100% they've got a good hit. But if it's not a pushed candidate, then it's hard to say. I don't know how strong that voting block is really.
It'll be interesting, yeah. And if there's crossover from other Chinese groups for a Fraternity candidate, if they get past the in-game divisions and see unification in their nationality and language and culture, if it's all the same culture, who knows? That would be interesting to see how that comes together.
Thing. Just think if you have trouble communicating.
Hold on, you're really quiet. Let me turn you up 1 second. Sorry, who was that?
It would help if I talked into the microphone, but don't think of it as a nationality issue. If you don't speak English clearly and primarily, if the CSM is operating in English, you just would want somebody there that could communicate more effectively as a go-between between you and that group. So it makes sense not from a nationality point of view, but just from a language point of view. Ask any of the Russians how they feel. Like they don't always have somebody that communicates clearly for them, and English is not the easiest language to get by.
Yeah, that's true there's a few candidates from representing groups that have languages that are not English. And
there's a Spanish candidate, is there not?
What's that? Did you say a British candidate?
Sorry. No, there's a Spanish candidate, I believe.
Yes, there is.
Yeah,
he's from Imperium as well, but he's there representing the Spanish community, and he's got quite a lot of support from the Spanish community, is my understanding.
Yeah, it's let me find his picture here. Jovenius Dracunius. He is Goonswarm Federation Requiem, but Requiem is a Spanish-speaking corporation. He has a whole Spanish language show. You have to understand, Spanish has no localization. Some of the guys that play in Spanish play using Google Translate to figure out what they're doing. I mean, they really suffer to play this game because there's nothing for them. And they still, I think thousands of people have been recruited to this game by this community. So it's not insignificant. It doesn't have a lot of numbers, but it has a ton of passion. So I don't know if that'll translate. But yeah, he definitely would be able to represent Spanish language stuff. He's been on a few times and he hangs out. He's actually one of our moderators too at TIS.
Yeah, so I mean, it's the eternal problem. Will it be? Is the voting block enough to do what you need to do? And it's a tough question.
Yeah.
But definitely, he'll take a slight hit just being Imperium, because a lot of the Imperium votes are the people that would vote Imperium are going to vote the Imperium ballot generally, and the people that aren't the Imperium ballot are going to look at him as an Imperium candidate, and there's no shortage of Imperium and no block representation, so it's going to hurt him in that regard, I guess you would say.
Yeah. Lower team Imperium. Bad place to be.
There's no doubt he's got a good priority, I guess, of issues. It's hard to say that cleanly, I guess, but he has a clear issue he wants to sort, which is Spanish localization, I assume. And it's definitely something that the community's been asking for a long time, and it's unfortunate we don't even have it at this point.
400 million Spanish speakers out there. Some of them like sci-fi.
Well, I'm sure there's more than a few.
What about this guy? He's run a few times. His name is Kellen Cerro. He's the leader of Weeb Fleet. He's former Horde. Got under a lot of pressure because of all the Weeb stuff. He's a very proud Weeb. And so he broke off and started Weeb Fleet. Talked to him a few times.
I don't know who he is.
Fascinating.
I stay away from the Weeb stuff as much as I can. So
yeah.
It's
he totally owns it. It's great to see someone own their thing. But it's pretty funny. So those that don't know, I don't actually know what Weeb is, but I think it's derogatory for
it's like an anime girl thing or something, right?
Yeah, anime. But I don't know, is it anime girls or anime in general, or who knows? But weeb is a dismissive term. I think you say that, he likes a bunch of anime or whatever. But this guy totally owns it. It's hilarious.
I mean, own your shit. Otherwise,
yeah, you can wear anything. Wear anything you want. Just own it. If you don't own it, you're gonna look like a fool. Kenneth Feld. I don't know if he's going to get a ton of support outside of, say, PanFam, but he's an industrialist and he's a smart guy.
Well, the reality is there's probably 2 candidates worth of votes in PanFam, and one of those candidates worth of votes is going to Gobbins, I would assume, as kind of the leader of the largest alliance within there. So if PanFam through PL and NC Dot or whatever rallies behind Blazing Bunny or Kenneth Feld or whoever, that person will probably have a pretty good shot at getting in. However, if they don't rally behind that person, and it's just Pandemic Legion votes for Kenneth, NC Dots for Blazing, neither of them make it in. So it's a very tricky dynamic in terms of how the different alliances within these larger groups will coalesce their votes.
I got to say, Kenneth is one of those guys you kind of want at the table. He's just such a smart guy. He works at a whole different level. He's articulate and rather likable. He cuts right to, like, you can tell when you're working with somebody or talking with someone who's, I don't know, like does a really high profile job or something, because they can get right to the crux of things quickly and descriptively with a clarity of language that's really shockingly fast. And that's Aerith has that same thing. I'm not personally a huge fan of Aerith's, but he's clearly a high level person in real life, so they're able to just kind of cut to the chase and be clear about it and communicate, hard concepts in a simple way. Kenneth has a lot of that going for him too. He's kind of on that level.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for Kenneth, as a member of Pandemic Legion, without, how do I put? Everybody that looks at him is going to look at him as a null guy from Pandemic Legion first, and then all of his other things second, right? Which is pretty standard for almost all the null candidates, to be honest. The only one who really kind of breaks that barrier in any real way is Brisk, and it kind of creates this dynamic where if somebody's industry based or high sec industry based, or even if the things that they care about are things that Kenneth might be okay to advocate for, my guess is he's not going to be their number one candidate in many cases.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's an industrial collective out there that can say, we want some industry in this game. Let's get Kenneth up there. But he's not playing to that.
There is other candidates who do attempt to represent the industrial side of EVE as well.
Yeah.
So in order for that to be functional, they'd have to organize and make a decision collectively. And not only that, so it's possible because Fuzzy Steve is giving up his seat. So that's going to free up a lot of those specific people.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And Kenneth, actually, he's active in the same channels as Steve. So maybe there's some market share there. It will be interesting.
I feel like there used to be more industry focused groups, as that's all they do, instead of just being industry people in something else.
Well, one of the biggest issues is that the industry in EVE is very competitive, right? So there's almost a disincentive for industrial players, especially in high sec where things are really cutthroat, to work together in any way, right? So if all of a sudden you're telling these people you have to work together, they're like, but I'd make better profits if I kept all my secret information.
He plays against himself. Like he sets margins and values that he wants to meet each month. Like he's not playing to play against anybody else. He's playing to see if he can meet his sales targets and his production targets within 30 days, and he continues to do that. Like that's what he gets off on. But like
that's great for him, but we're discussing the potential voter block, and people would have to throw their support his way.
He's very good at what he's doing. He's been doing it a long time, but he doesn't look for a way to organize with other people that are doing industry. Like if he happens to interact with them, fine. But I think that's not unique. I think that's pretty common.
Well, we'll see. We should put out position papers on everyone and see if that helps. One last person I want to check out. A beautiful man, Mike Azaria. Like, sweet, nice guy, been playing forever, spends his time giving people second chances that have just started the game. He's been on CSM. He ran a bunch, lost, and then he finally got on. Then he had to take some time off, and he's back. I just can't say enough about this guy. He's such a nice guy. Is that enough these days?
So I don't know much, if anything, really about Mike. So I'm not really the best qualified person to say something. I mean, if there's anybody that is a natural kind of the instant go-to thought to replace kind of Steve Renukin, who's been the high sec guy in the council for years, the go-to thought usually it instantly falls to Mike. I know that from just reading around a little bit.
Yeah,
he's well respected. He's obviously got plenty of feedback to give. Will that be good enough to get him in this year? I don't know, but certainly he's always in the conversation. It seems to be around who that kind of voter is looking for.
Right. Oh, I lied. One more. January, Valentine.
Hey, what's up?
Oh, you're here. I was about to talk about you, so I'm glad you told me you were here.
Okay,
now
so
you
talk
can
about it.
myself. So January is shipshape producer of TIS, makes the calls, arranges the guests, does the paperwork, makes sure that everybody's on the same page.
Where they to be on time.
On time. And she takes no BS from anyone, including me. So she's constantly chastising me to do better, to do it right. But when I
say encouraging, not
encouraging, yeah.
Chastising is a very hard word.
That's how I inferred it, but yeah, you meant it differently. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. And she's very organized and passionate about EVE Online. And she has a really good sense of where the narrative is for the game. She and this is why she's the producer of TIS, because, and I've told her this many times, she has a nose for the news. She figures out what the big conflicts are, what are meaningful, and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of a big picture person that can see that. So that's January. Who happens to be here?
It's kind of changed, though. I mean, I would say that was especially true when I first started. But as I kind of grew into the role, I really learned a lot from Elise about not so much finding the big news or the A list names, is just finding super interesting stories that maybe no one's really heard about, or it's really just localized to one like tiny region of Eve, and really bringing that up to the kind of universal level attention.
Yeah, story. All right, those are some.
So, what do you kind of feel that is your kind of competitive advantage, in the CSM elections, January? Like, obviously, I mean, I see you as part, a member of the Science and Trade Institute on this on the screen here. Like,
that's a huge voting block.
Yeah. So, where do you feel like you're going to be best able to draw voters from?
To be clear, those are NPCs. They don't vote. Okay.
Well, no, it's an NPC corp. There's lots of actual players there.
That's true.
The primary purpose of the CSM is to provide feedback to CCP. And there is a lot of bad feedback. There's a lot of feedback that should not be, paid any attention to. My job as a producer is to look at the entire scope of media and in game and figure out what is worth passing on to produce a show with and what's ignoring. And I feel like that's an excellent quality for someone who has to, first of all, kind of have a working knowledge of different, all aspects of Eve, has to know who the experts are and go to them for advice, and then put that together in a story that anyone could understand. And that's basically the CSM.
And you have to weed through all the spin.
Yes, you have to understand what is truth, what is rumor, what is, just posturing, and what is actually truth and good truth.
That sounded very 1984. But
what's good truth? I like that.
Fake
Well,
news.
I'm
good speak.
not. Maybe that was a bad word, but it's.
If I may offer, January, like there's a lot of people who have extremely subjective and emotional opinions that are not particularly well articulated. They know how to communicate their pain, that they are in pain, that they dislike something, and that is where their ability ends. And that is not feedback that is valuable and usable by CCP, other than the fact that it exists and they're aware that it exists. So it doesn't need to be brought to them.
So, most of the CSM in some way, shape, or form have things they would like to push. Like, for example, I know from my first attempt to get on the CSM was I pushed for ship balance, and that's been the thing I've focused on more than anything. Is there any area of Eve where you feel you are like, or what is the priority you're going to be trying to push? besides just good feedback?
I don't know. There's so much that I'm really interested in. I don't want to get in the mindset of I can go to CCP and like demand something. What I want is I really liked when Ratatai came on and he's like, what is sustainable? What is healthy? And it's more of a I want to understand from CCP's point of view what is healthy and what is sustainable and how can I find the good examples of that or even bad examples of that in the game and bring that to them. Those are questions that they are answering themselves, and I think the players are in the best position to answer that for them. So if I can look at what's going on in the entire universe and say, okay, this part of Eve is sustainable, it's healthy, it's in a good spot. This part, not so much. Then I'm going to push for the not so much part to get attention and figure out how to bring that back in order.
So you have a bit of an ecosystem focus, you'd say?
I guess. I mean, that is the CSM. It's not sitting in an echo chamber, but it's understanding what is good and what's bad about the game and working alongside CCP alongside their goals because their goals are often not our goals to bring that to pass.
Well, all right.
Have we talked at all about the CCP show yesterday?
Oh, we haven't.
If you want
to take that topic,
literally, that's why I came because I thought it was going to be off the hook on this show today, going about like, oh shit, new ships. Ah, look at those Triblavians.
Yeah. So there was
saving it for Sunday.
Matterall, go ahead.
We're saving it for Sunday, but I'm going to give you a half hour to talk about it. I'm going to disappear though.
Matterall's like, I can't handle this anymore. Fuck this shit.
I mean, yeah, I can give like a 30-second like.
Let's go.
It was a good show, but I don't want to spoil anything if you wanted to save it for Sunday. They released a new scope video. There were some very, very heavy names on the panel. Obviously, Berger was there, and he's like top man. But I believe that the most notable guest was Delegate Zero, who is notoriously difficult to nail down. He is the lore master. He is literally the mind that is effectively in charge of all of the story writing. He's got so many moving pieces kept in his mind that it's incredible, and we were able to pick his brain on a number of things. He did drop a number of canonical facts that had not been confirmed until now. So I guess we'll that's your teaser for the Sunday show. We'll talk about
what's canonical mean. Is that like a nautical term?
Yeah, it was definitely it was quite a thorough lore episode. They covered a lot.
The show continued after the CCP stream ended. Delegate Zero and Convict and Coyote. So CCP Coyote is one of the engineers on the invasion team, Team Event Horizon, along with Sledgehammer. So Coyote was there, and so Coyote and Convict and Delegate Zero followed over to Ash's show afterwards and got like a lot more in depth. It was really fascinating. I recommend everyone check out the video on demand on Twitch.
Well, let's hear it, Fonsoy. What do they actually say?
I mean,
if
we're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about it. But obviously there was some lore stuff that was confirmed that's not necessarily going to interest everybody directly. But the one important fact that was shared is that this is coming on the 26th. That they gave us a date. So Chapter 3 is coming on the 26th. That content is going to drop. We're going to start seeing all the things that we saw in the Singularity update that have not yet made it to Tranquility. That's a change to the structure of invasions as a whole. They're no longer going to be, we found a foothold, everything 1 jump and 2 jumps from the foothold is now part of the invasion. The invasion begins, progresses, finishes, and goes away. That system is no longer. We don't specifically know how the back and forth is going to work, but there will be a back and forth. There is a middle stage where a given system will begin, and it will be pushed through 3 stages of progression, either towards Edencom, in favor of Edencom and Concord and the Empires, or in favor of the Triblavian Collective. Once it reaches the final state, in the case of Edencom, that's Edencom Bastion, and Edencom Fortress, and in the case of the Triblavians, that's final liminality. The text strings that are associated with those states indicate that the opposing force has given up and will no longer be fighting for that. So that indicates that systems that reach a final state, either Edencom victory or a Triblavian victory, will remain that way for at least some period, if not indefinitely. We have no idea exactly what that mechanic is going to entail time-wise, but it's things are changing. Other things that we've seen are the fact that this will cause moving the system towards the Triblavians will cause the security status to drop. We don't know the scale of those drops, how it's going to work, but it does appear that once final liminality is reached, that the security status will be removed entirely, and the system will become nullsec. It'll be NPC nullsec. You won't be able to take sovereignty in it, but there will be no Concord presence, no security standings whatsoever. The Newsco video also showed imagery of the new ships, the Zappy Boys. Again, no further data on that, not how they're going to work, not when they're coming, not how many of them there are going to be. All that is still super hush-hush and top secret. None of that has been released to anyone. I have a couple of predictions about those ships. My personal predictions, and this is based on my understanding of things, not anything that I have seen in any official information anywhere, but I have 4 specific predictions. I predict that we're going to see 3 sizes, a small, a medium, and a large. That they will be a single module weapon system like disintegrators, that the ships will be shield-based as opposed to armor-based, and finally that the ships will have a remote shield and or capacitor bonus. Those are my personal 4 predictions about the Zappy Boy ships.
Zappy Boys? Kind of
Yeah,
like Cats meme instead, and call it Lightning Cats.
Well, people have affectionately been calling them the Zappy Boy, but it's the, that electricity arcing weapon that jumps. We saw it in the Eclipse trailer jumping to 3 separate targets. And it appeared that the ship that was firing it was a cruiser size, but there's no way to confirm that.
I think we need to work on our naming conventions better. Zappy Boys.
Well, I mean, that's obviously not what it's going to be called, but that is what the player base. Yeah, that's what the player base has been calling it, because it's Zappy. But yeah, it appears to be the reason for these predictions of mine are because these ships appear to be an inverse of the Triblavians and their disintegrators. It's the disintegrators really, really, really double down on single target damage. They ask you, please don't make me change targets. When you make me change targets, I'm terrible. So this would be an inverse of that. It hits multiple targets from the outset. And that dynamic has led me to the other conclusions, that it will be a single module weapon system, etc. The shields versus armor. The Triblavians have a remote armor bonus, so I expect these ships to have a remote shield bonus.
So are the Edencom sites down?
The Edencom combat sites that were part of the Capsuleer Day clash are now down. Yesterday, they were either gone yesterday or gone the day before, but they are certainly gone today.
Yeah. So no more cerebral accelerators for the majority.
Well, there's always Master at Arms. Get your recruitment program going.
Yeah.
All right. Is that all we've got?
Well, question,
Yeah,
Matter, have you ever talked about the Tranquility Trading Tower low-sec in this show?
No, I wanted to talk about that, actually. That's why I was saying stick around.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Why don't you?
Excellent. Let me tell you about our newest product in Ignoitton low-sec. Brand new Keepstar, brand new Tatara, brand new Thucker Rig Satellio. It's there for everybody to enjoy, to build, to react, to trade their super caps. It's there for you. It's there for the viewer. It's there for everybody.
That's alluring. But
Thucker rigged, you say?
Thucker rigged.
They're not messing around, people. They're serious about this.
I don't even want to ask.
Thucker rig Satellios are not super common, let's say. But we put up a new Keepstar in low sec Ignoitton, 3 jumps from Jita, 2 jumps from perimeter. It's pretty awesome. It's standard TTT level. So as high as the capital cost can be, we spend all the money and you get to enjoy it.
I have this on the wrong screen. Let me grab this. And there it is, super close proximity to the first tower.
Yeah. Well, do I tell you that like 2 days before I dropped it, Matter was like, you should put a Keepstar up in Ignoitton for me. I was like, a little late on that one.
That's where I was going to put the Keepstar.
The broadcast tower, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a nice little location. It's
80% northern logistics.
Yeah, it's like massive, the amount of logistics stuff that goes through there. There's actually like 60 or 70 citadels in the system. I'm kind of curious how many there'll be in like 6 months after they get used to having a Keepstar there to do it for them for free.
Did you guys use the data from ARC to figure that out, or how did you guys come up?
The logistic level?
Yeah, or the travel and everything was passing through.
Well, I don't know about the 80% number, but you can just like be in the system at any point, and every 5 to 10 minutes, the jump freighters warp into the gate and jump.
Just look at the Astra houses that are there.
Why that system? Because it's so close to Jita. It'd be the big one.
It's 3 jumps out.
Or 2 jumps from perimeter.
Yeah. And it's low sec, so you can jump freighters in.
Yeah, no. At this point, it's mostly just going to be a battle of letting people actually know it's there. And over time, much like everything else, safety and security and everything else will draw the industrial people that want to utilize it. We're patient. Well,
well, what's the advantage of 2 Keepstars so close to each other? What's this one supposed to do, and what do you think people will do with it?
It's mostly for trading supers more than anything. If you want to create, like, there's a couple low sec Keepstars out there now. There's Bascarin and can't remember the other one. But if people are going to dump their supers, they need a Keepstar. So there's got to be a Keepstar somewhere to do it, and this gives them that opportunity. They can buy them, they can sell them. That's kind of what the Keepstar's for, and of course, just the maximum level of safety and security you can get in low sec for your assets. And then the Tatar is for reactions, which you can't do in high sec, standard, TC rig, etc. With a refinery as well, so that you can bring in minerals, take them over to the Sotillo, and then build capitals cheaper than anywhere else in the game.
I think that's really interesting because all organizations are used to going to Jita or around Jita for their trading needs. And if you're in high sec, you're going to stay in high sec. You're probably not going to go to a low sec system. But for everyone else, going to high sec is that additional step. And if this trade hub really picks up, it eliminates some workload. And if you still need to go to Jita, that's fine. It's only 3 jumps away.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious as well, because we have like kind of what you would call the safe Tatara, which is like basically people can bring in their moon minerals and react moon minerals and react them there, which you can't do in high sec in general. So it's almost always done in null sec, because all low sec Tataras generally have a very short lifespan unless they're in somebody's like very deep corner of controlled low sec. Like I think there's one in down in Molden Heath where Rocket Crew lives, and maybe Snuff had one in Black Rise, but I'm not tracking one. So it's almost always done in nullsec. So it's been like a section of the industrial game that's been entirely cut off to high sec players, and this gives them the opportunity to do reactions, and thus, in theory, people from nullsec and around the game can bring in their moon materials to Ignoitton, put them for sale in the Keepstar, and they can literally be undocked, warped to the star, and reacted there. And it's not
it's a yellow sun. You may be in trouble.
I can. Whenever people started talking about this blue sun shit, I'm like, oh fuck, I better check.
Well, amazing how that affects things. You gotta check the sun color.
So I'll just break off for like a half a second on this. The warning to us from the Triblavians was that imminent glory and imminent gold, and the Rasnaborg reports indicated that the A0s and potentially B0s are imminent glory. They did not define imminent gold. We don't know what that is, but what we do know is that there were files changed in the last Singularity update, showing specific changes to two types of stars: the regular and the small blues, and the yellows. And they included a file that was named translation. So without imminent gold defined, no Rasnaborg reports talking about yellow stars, I would suggest that maybe yellows are not so safe. Can't be sure, but maybe.
Just to be clear to the viewing audience, the TTT will be protected by the full force. Whoever's required. Your goods are safe. Don't let this charlatan, convince you of the lack of safety. No, it's somebody in your chat actually commented. I think this is a perfect truth. Modern Eve, the realization that good services for players, whether corps for newbies or high-tech infrastructure, is good for business, is kind of the gill we're working with, which is to provide literal business practices, best services at the best price, and it's interesting. A lot of people don't like it, mind you, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth. I like you. I just hate the idea that nullsec is just unstoppable.
Well, it really isn't nullsec, is the funny thing, because for the most part, we buy in anybody in the relevant area, whether it be high sec, low sec, wherever, and it definitely instantly becomes not just. The problem is, much like in a real world scenario, you need the military to enforce that final level of law, right? Like the police do the day-to-day business of everything, but the police always need a military behind them, otherwise they can't do their job, and it creates a situation much like in Eve where you need the local police, be they pirate or whoever else, to be on the take, but you also need somebody in the background to support them if a true armed insurrection shows up. It's interesting dynamics, to say the least.
Yeah, I don't think people appreciate how much you have to be willing to make deals. That's the part. That's the other side of it, is that you, in order to have this sort of thing going, you have to be able to deal with different groups and make different deals with them, which cuts into your bottom line. And so because you're not greedy, you're able to do this.
I linked in chat the file update for the blue, the small blue, and the yellow stars.
Some about a lot of those systems are being ice belt systems. That seems interesting.
Well, just remember, CCP knows their game pretty well. I'm not saying they know it as good as the players sometimes, but they usually have a pretty good grasp of their game, and they know how they can turn the wrenches to make us squeal. So
they can make things interesting.
Yeah,
they don't know how it's going to turn out, but they know it's going to be interesting.
Ice shortages mean fuel shortages, which means higher travel prices for capitals.
Although it's funny, but because isotopes have been going down consistently for the last 6 to 8 months because of the Sino changes, where isotopes are now like half of what they were before.
I've noticed that, yeah. It should be the reverse, but maybe it takes time.
Why should it be the reverse?
Well, you have more people in supers traveling.
But you don't. You have significantly less.
Less sinos.
Less opportunities to travel, but more people in supers to travel. Yeah, I guess the Sino hits really.
Since the Sino changes, the average number of super pilots in the game has been going down consistently.
If you think about it, any fight in the past, you could fit a Sino to anything. You can escalate off an interceptor, a Mauler, a Drake. And now to actually escalate, you have to have a force recon in your fleet. And there's a lot of fleets I've seen where, we don't force recon. There's no opportunity to light a Sino. So all those opportunities for escalation never will occur unless you have those ships on the field.
Well, this may be what's needed to get that ice price.
Yeah, no more accidental escalations. Like, oh, now there's some caps.
So you just said something there, Madro, that I definitely think is worth talking about, is the fact that there's actually less super pilots in the game than there was a year ago. I'm not sure if you've been tracking this or not, but like the average number of super pilots in the game is way down.
Is that right?
Because the more you nerf something, the more people want to do it less. You know, it's pretty standard stuff, right?
So is that how it works? Yeah.
You know, it's only been falling. I wouldn't say it's falling off the cliff, but it's a slow dwindle. Like,
well, the hope is that the developers have been taking away power, or rather raw power, from these ships, so that they can add some other sort of power, some other sort of utility in the future. Again, there's no indications. I'm not quoting anything that I've seen anywhere. I'm just saying if I was a game designer and I wanted something to be better and it was too powerful now and I wanted it to make more sense, then I'd scale it back, give it less raw power, and then I'd give it something else that makes it useful.
Well, they tend to target things that are not in balance, and they tie new features to those things. I don't know if they always do that, but that's how they work long term, or did. It's a new group in there doing the resource balancing, so I don't really know how it's going to work now.
Well, when it comes to resource balancing and ship balancing, generally with ships, if something is incredibly overpowered, players will drive towards it. If Rorquals are brokenly overpowered, players will find a way to put as many pilots as they can in Rorquals. Same with Titans. If Titans are overpowered, people will find as many ways as possible to get people in Titans. But if things aren't overpowered, then all those pilots you put in Titans are going to be like, why am I sitting in a Titan all day? I'd like to log in and do subcap PvP, please.
Well, the opposite is true.
And at the same regard, all of those pilots that were going to be driven to Titans before now are not. So the influx doesn't equal the outflux either. So you just continue to lose pilots in that segment of the player base.
And we can't expect, like, the game developer that has something in the game that is too powerful can't expect the players to just refrain from maxing it out. Like, of course they're going to max it out because all of their opponents are going to max it out and everybody else. So, like, you just have to. It becomes this arms race. So it's really on the developer to balance things such that it does not behoove the individual players and player organizations to double down too strongly on any one mechanic.
A couple interesting things there. I think the opposite is true as well. When you accomplish a goal, let's say you get into a ship finally, then you kind of stop playing because you've done it. That's if you don't have a next goal, then you're in trouble. But the other thing that's interesting is if people aren't aspiring to the top ship, the Titan, and collecting ships along the way, like a Dreadnought, for instance, does that mean an overall demand drop for all capital ships because people aren't moving on that track anymore? Instead, now they're moving to the Triblavian track or something?
Well,
whatever,
I agree with
whatever
you
happened to bigger is not always better.
Yeah, I agree with you that there is an aspirational requirement to any game, but I disagree with you that aspirational requirement needs to be capitals. Exactly. Many pilots are focused on being the best interceptor pilot, the best Ikki-Tursa pilot, the best Macarial pilot, like, and those type of goals are just as relevant and just as significant as being the best Ragnarok pilot. And it's important to understand that in many cases, if people don't have to drive towards flying an Avatar or an Erebus, they won't. But if their alliance is telling them, because the alliance cannot exist without, you know, Titan fleet of X, they will drive towards that. And at the moment, the game doesn't. Your gameplay is not benefited by having those super capital resources the way it was a year ago.
I just think some people want to belong to the group, kind of hide in the group, but just belong to it, have those opportunities that the big groups have. And some people want to distinguish themselves as a certain notable player. That might be two different instincts or impulses.
Yeah. I mean, they're different, but they're also the same. It's a complex discussion, to say the least.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. We'll wrap it up here. Sorry, I got cut off. I have to share the workspace with my still at work wife. And there's all kinds of schooling going on. Not just
Get out of the office, Matterall. She's got dibs.
Yep. So thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and raid. I think it was Torvald. Yeah. Have some fun there. We will see you tomorrow. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us.